Please welcome to the stage Kate Warren of DevEx and our esteemed panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? I am really delighted to be having this discussion with this really amazing group of leaders that are working really at the forefront of solving a lot of our world's big problems. And our world has a lot of big problems right now, some pretty complex ones. And I'm with DevEx. We cover the global development space, which has particularly had some challenges this year. And I think a lot of people are asking, how are we going to fund? The needs are still there. Funding and financing is going away. How are we going to fill that gap? We often hear people say, well, philanthropy can come in and fill that gap. We know it's not quite that simple, but there is a role for philanthropy, and we're seeing that philanthropies are really thinking differently about that role, moving from patron to partner and new models. And so we want to explore some of that today and how technology can help enable that. So I'm delighted to be joined by, we have Tim Cottigan, who's the CEO of GoFundMe right here, and Michael Nyanis, who's the president and CEO of UNICEF USA, Mark Fizo, president and CEO of Food for the Hungry, and Angela Williams, president and CEO of United Way Worldwide. So Michael, I'm actually going to start with you because I did mention global development and being with UNICEF, you're certainly feeling some of the effects of the cuts and the drawback from the US government, but also not just the US, other governments as well, while needs are also extremely high. And there's been this kind of almost, I wouldn't say competition, but maybe in some ways between, do we invest in humanitarian response? There's a lot of conflict and crises, or more long-term development. And I'd love to hear kind of how you think about finding that balance between responding to the immediate humanitarian needs with being able to build more durable, long-term, resilient systems in the development umbrella.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. So much has changed in our world with the cutbacks from traditional donor governments like our own and in Europe as well. So it's causing a rethink in many places within the development and humanitarian sector. And I think there seems to be still a commitment to humanitarian aid, to life-saving aid. There also seems to be an interest in sort of on the other end of the continuum of trade and business investment. How do we grow economies? And I think that's all great. But there's a slice in the middle that I think is really important, which we call development assistance, which is focused on education and core healthcare issues and governance and social services, the things that give people who are emerging out of humanitarian aid, emergency sort of situations, the capacity they need to actually grow themselves, grow their communities, grow their businesses so that they're ready for investment on the other side. And my concern is I don't hear enough about that piece in the middle, and I think it's a part that just can't be lost.
Yeah. So Mark, I'd love to bring you in Food for the Hungry. You all, I think a lot of philanthropy or donor funding has been very project-based, right? So you go in, you have a very specific project, and it isn't necessarily getting to that systemic, durable change. And Food for the Hungry, you guys take a very multifaceted approach, looking at really building resilience and resilient systems, and really locally led, working with local communities.
Right.
I'd love to hear about that approach and why you think that might be the way we need to be approaching it going forward.
Yeah, it's great to be here with Tim and Michael and Angela. Thanks for having us. It's a great question. Food for the Hungry being an operational NGO working alongside communities for over 50 years, we've really learned that locally led development requires a fundamentally different paradigm. It is absolutely about listening deeply and consultation, but it requires a commensurate, different approach that seeks to also understand how we as development actors in that ecosystem change, what we have to do. We have to shift from really being focused on inputs and be more focused on trying to find catalytic solutions, moving away from sort of temporal, additive, transactional projects, as you mentioned, that have one specific point, to leveraging the exponential and multi-directional power of platforms. We've learned that it really means that we have to focus on systems, not symptoms, and building resilient systems, whether it be healthcare systems or food systems or market-based systems. And to do that, we have to make sure that we're contributing to helping local actors build resilience, different types of capabilities. And so an example of that is Food for Hunger has been privileged to learn with and support the Vice President of Guatemala's office to develop a national resilience roadmap. Another example of that for us internally as we examine our role as development actor is we're shifting from being a traditional not-for-profit 401c3 NGO to becoming a perpetual purpose trust like Patagonia, where legally, literally speaking, our purpose, our mission owns the organization, and inviting the people we serve, what we call our shareholders, to have decision rights and power in a council to help govern that entity. So those are some of the shifts we're making, a lot more to learn, but I think it fundamentally has to have a different paradigm, a different approach.
Yeah, and I think that goes to this, it's a shift of power, right?
Right.
And it's the decisions aren't by the person giving money, it's the person that is on the ground and what's best for them. And Angela, I'd love to talk about how you see the role of philanthropy shifting power back to communities and how you approach that at United Way.
What's interesting about United Way is that we're 138 years old. And we are very much a global network operating in 35 countries, but hyper-locally focused in that our staff live and work in the communities in which we serve. Also, what's so unique, and when we think about ourselves as a delivery system that collaborates with all of my colleagues here on this stage and so many more, I'm not sure that what we're doing is going to necessarily shift as much as lean in. Because we partner with 49,000 different corporations. We have employees, millions of employees around the world that give their own paychecks to nonprofits and to United Way to distribute to our more than 50,000 nonprofit partners around the world. So when you think about that, it's like our own corporate GoFundMe rather than the individual GoFundMe, but it's still the same idea that people want to invest locally where they live, work, and play. And they want to see that their dollars are having immediate impact. One of the things that you just said, Mark, which is key, is that, again, though, it requires the listening, it requires the engagement, and the setting of direction by the people that we want to work and support. And that's the part that where I do answer your question about how does philanthropy shift, is leaning even more so into let's listen. You tell us what the solution is to your problem. We're no longer going to show up as saviors. We're going to show up as partners.
And I think that gets to this maybe movement around trust-based philanthropy. Mackenzie Scott is a good example of moving towards that. We're also seeing a growth in just direct cash in the humanitarian response world and some really powerful impact of that. And so, Tim, I feel like at GoFundMe, you're right in the center of both of that. If you think about trust, people are going online and they're giving their money to an individual that they trust is going to make the right decision for it, and it's just that direct cash infusion. So how do you think about that model being complementary to other more traditional forms of giving?
Well, very, and Angela, you kind of hit it on the head in terms of enabling people to tell the world, their friends, their community, and the wider world what they need at a point in time. Just quickly, we've had more than 200 million people and organizations use GoFundMe to raise over $40 billion. So that's the scale of it. But the key is allowing a person to ask for help for themselves, a relative, or a nonprofit organization that they care about. And I think what you see here, and maybe this is why we were picked, is this is an amazing set of complementary organizations that can help from different dimensions to solve people's problems at the individual level and at the large scale level. I'll just give you a very real example, an American one, LA wildfires. So what do people need when you lose your community, your home, your school, everything? You need everything. One thing you need is cash, to your point, right away. So we helped people raise over $250 million. 2/3 of that went to the 10,000 families that created a fundraiser, and 1/3 went to the nonprofits, which we enable. A lot of people don't know we provide the fundraising software for World Central Kitchen, Salvation Army, Direct Relief, and 4,500 other nonprofits. And those are all sources of help. You need money right away to make the first month's rent for that flat you need, that apartment you need while you're unhoused. And then you need food. you need resources, you need water, you need schooling, you need baby formula, and then you need long-term support. And I think what you're seeing represented here and from the sector is there are people and organizations who are placed to provide all of those. And I want to add that includes government. And I just want to do a shout out. The Army Corps of Engineers has done an amazing job. I happen to come from Altadena, which is one of the towns affected, cleaning up our towns so that it can be ready for a rebuild. But we play a part, and that part is allowing people to express what they care about and gaining support on the back of that.
Do you mind if I just piggyback on that? Because we were just talking about that. And so then where United Way comes in is the 211 hotline that people can call in the United States. It covers 95% of communities for health and human services. And so then our partnership with Airbnb, American Express, was able to put tens of thousands of people into homes immediately. And then they can call the hotline and say, we need food and other resources. And so again, we all work together collaboratively. And what I want to say is, in crises and disruption and chaos, that is the absolute best time to look around and find out who you want to work with and say, let's get in this and let's do something different and think of creative and innovative ways to meet needs. And so I'm hoping that at this moment in time, that we're going to be able to do that, and the way that we show up in communities around the globe will be forever changed for the positive.
And I know you want to get to more questions, but
No, go for it.
it's an interesting topic because, you know, in the U.S. we have some of those systems, right, that we can leverage them. In other places, for example, where Food for the Hungry, Guatemala, Mozambique, Philippines, they may not be there. But it just shows an example of what a resilient system looks like, that there are other things that allow a country, a community to be able to mitigate unexpected stressors or punches, in a sense, and be able to leverage different ways of doing things and adapt. And so it's a great model, right? Can we copy some of those things, and can we build those? And like we're doing with the Vice President's Office in Guatemala, building those systems that they themselves are resilient.
Maybe one
Mike?
quick comment on the same topic. You mentioned direct cash transfers, which is now a favored strategy of ours and others in emergency response. We're doing a lot of this in Gaza, for instance. It's difficult to get supplies and things into Gaza, but you'd be amazed at how quickly the commercial sector can provide goods into Gaza when people have money to spend. Problem is people aren't working, but the direct cash transfer is basically putting money in the hands of families, actually creates a market pretty quickly where they can get the basic things that their families need. And we see that in emergency settings all over the place.
Yeah, I want to stick on this collaborative philanthropy angle, and it's something that, again, trust-based philanthropy and collaborative philanthropy are a lot of people are talking about now. And Tim, thinking about, you know, how you're aligning your giving or the people that are using your platform for giving with some of the other groups here, or with government, as you mentioned, government being a strong partner. Yeah. What more do you think we could do to really make it more collaborative, which can make it more durable, more impactful, of recognizing there isn't one single actor who's going to solve all these alone, but you know, what opportunities do you see for more collaboration?
Well, it's mutual education. So, for example, we work with 211 in affected areas when there's a crisis, and I think we've learned more and more about what we respectively do in helping each other, so that's a great example. We enable people to raise for nonprofits, so sort of understanding what an organization needs. And one of the things we're working on right now to sort of connect the dots is making the point that an individual can fundraise for an organization. And when they fundraise for an organization, they are not just raising money. They are increasing awareness and attention, and that leads to more people becoming interested in supporting the cause. We've been doing a trial with American Cancer Society. As an example, we had 40,000 people create fundraisers this year for American Cancer Society. It's raised a bunch of money, but it's reached 10 million people. And so those kind of intersections between, if you like, a traditional organization that needs to meet Gen Z folks and needs evangelists to carry the message of why what they're doing matters so much, and do that in a new way that connects dots that reflect the digital era that we live in. So that's, I think, an answer to your question, is sort of connecting these dots, communicating, collaborating, and finding the points of respective strength and bringing them to bear.
Yeah, it's really providing that human-to-human connection that feels harder to find in
Well,
these
you
days.
talked about trust. Like we know from all the studies from Edelman and so on that trust has moved from institutions to individuals, and particularly again, folks under 30, they have parasocial relationships, and they trust people online that they follow much more than anyone else. So if you can, enable folks online to be the messengers, people will follow that.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I think Gallup recently came out with an advice of a trust barometer around some stats on how many people trust the multilateral UN system, and they're not great. I don't want to quote the number to get it wrong, but I think it was something about 30%, which has gone way down. So Mike, I'd love to hear how you think about the role of the multilateral system, but working alongside other groups and then rebuilding that trust with people that the multilateral approach can also work in that collaborative effort.
Yeah, maybe just a quick story. There was last year we received a very large estate gift from a longtime donor who had passed away, and his sister was managing the estate, and she was a little not happy that so much money was going to UNICEF. She believed the best thing to do was to invest in small local organizations at the community level, which is a good argument to make. But she attended a big meeting that we had, and she kind of heard the value of UNICEF in a couple ways. One is both global scale, the ability to reach anywhere around the world, and also to do it in scale to maximize the number of children who can be impacted. Number two, the ability of UNICEF to work with local partners on the ground, which is a key part of our strategy, is investing in local NGOs and local government institutions to build. And then third, the unique role we have as a UN agency to influence governments. We did a pilot project in Guatemala, early childhood education for 2 to 4 year olds to try to build up their capacity before they get to school. We could do it in 50 communities with the resources we had. If you want to reach every child in Guatemala, we can't do it. Only the government can. We had the data to show how effective this was. The government Ministry of Education picked up this, and it's now in more than 500 communities around there. That's what we're really trying to do, is influence the government to be able to take that over. So as I explained all of that to her, she see the value actually in a multilateral institution that has those relationships with government, that has global scale, that has local reach as well.
If I can, I love that story because, I think there's sometimes a false dichotomy of local or global, multilateral or hyper-local, and really, poverty is so pernicious. It takes everything. And I think if we can figure out how to skin this where it's wholly local,
Yes.
bona fide, legitimate, deep roots, connections, networks, and wholly global, scale, reach, learning, and can we marry those and rather have this false dichotomy where we have to pick? What does that look like? It's hard to do, but I think that's really part of the answer, particularly given where we are now.
Yeah. Well, in our last couple minutes, I want to hear from each of you. What do you see next, and what do you, if you're getting one piece of advice to the people who are in this room on how philanthropy can be truly, catalytic and an enabler to solving some of these crises and filling that gap that we're seeing, particularly on more traditional kind of funding. And Angela, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I have a number of different thoughts, but one thing I would say is we did not really talk about the value of volunteerism, which is also a form of giving. And the volunteerism usually is what triggers the younger generations to say, I'm in this now, and they grow up to be philanthropists financially. At this moment in time, we've talked about that no one entity, no one sector can do it alone. Collaboration, you've heard that word multiple times, and we can't underestimate the value of coming together because every day, just know something's gonna happen somewhere. And so if we start documenting and putting together MOUs and ways of systems of agreement to work together, globally, locally, then I think that's the best chance we have for communities to thrive.
Mark?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? One thing, I knew you were going to do that. So for us, it's a couple things, but one is sort of like we've on the panel hill. How do we leverage the power of platforms? What does that look like? And then to do the thing which doesn't seem to be very sexy or romantic, which is, systems. How do we address systems so they're resilient? I think that's where we need to put our efforts.
I think there are different ways for philanthropists to get involved today. We have a new program around childhood nutrition called the Child Nutrition Fund. Major philanthropists put up $500 million commitment to drive matches to that from other philanthropists to come in, and then to use that money to incentivize governments to put their own money in. So this is creating leverage upon leverage, and I think these are kind of innovative ways that we're not going to fill the public funding gaps that are there, but we can do it in a different way to create more opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, last thought. Where possible, we know that a human story is what cuts through. So if we can take what you do, for instance, battling malaria and bed nets, and take a story of how that really helped a family and have that cut through, and then explain, here's how that happened. But the emotional connection is the story, and then you can follow in with the logic and the scale and the full story behind that. Finding that combination, I think, is so critical.
Yeah, well, lots of exciting opportunities, which I know we all need right now. So thank you, Angela, Mark, Michael, Tim, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
folks.